Welcome to the Hey Docs podcast with your host, Jill Allen. In this special episode, I will be exploring the journey of launching a successful orthodontic practice with one of my very own startups, Dr. Adam Reynolds of OrthoDesignCo. Adam will share the inspiring process of creating and staying true to a practice vision, even in the face of challenges, and how fully embracing digital solutions from day one has shaped his practice. We'll also dive into the strategic decision to outsource key functions, allowing the practice to operate with the efficiency of a DSO while maintaining independence. Let's get into it. We all know running and growing an orthodontic practice isn't easy, and technology is supposed to help you, but oftentimes your practice management software doesn't. Some of them are even clunky and need lots of third-party add-ons. That's why I recommend Greyfinch to my startup and existing clients, because Greyfinch is different. Greyfinch is an all-in-one web-based platform that saves you time and boosts your client base, productivity, and bottom line, with no downloads or third-party software needed. It even has tools you can't find anywhere else, like televisits, two-way email and text messaging, a patient self-service hub, and much more. Want to see how it can grow your practice? Visit greyfinch.com/Jill Allen and see why countless leading practices have made the switch. Are you feeling the squeeze from declining starts and cash flow as costs continue to rise? Building on their industry-leading patient acquisition, insurance management, and collections solution, OrthoFi is delivering groundbreaking innovations to keep your practice thriving. OrthoFi's latest feature, iMax, allows you to maximize every insurance claim submission, adding tens of thousands of dollars to your annual production. Plus, with the game-changing combo of FPT10 and third-party financing, OrthoFi is making it even easier for patients to say yes to treatment while ensuring steady cash flow for your practice. OrthoFi's commitment to your success in today's evolving orthodontic landscape is why I recommend them to my clients, and right now is the best time to get started. Visit startmoresmiles.com and use promo code HeyDocs to get 50% off your implementation. I am so excited to have you on Hey Docs. Thanks for being here today.
It's my pleasure. Super excited.
Yes, me too. It's always super fun when I get to interview one of my own docs for the show. And I know we've got a lot that we're going to be talking about today, but I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind just telling a little bit about yourself and your journey as you started out your own orthodontic practice, OrthoDesignCo, and let the listeners know a little bit about you.
Sure. I have 5 kids and a wonderful wife. I still like to play soccer on the weekends and pretend like I can still play, and I love to run. I went to dental school in Kentucky, told my wife I never would, but that's where she's from, so that's where we ended up. And it was a great experience. And I did residency in Kansas City. When I was graduating, I was negotiating to buy a practice in Kentucky where my wife's from. After 6 months of negotiating, a few months before I graduated, the doctor pulled out. I graduated residency with 3 kids and no job. After all that time. So you had those moments of, do I go get a job at McDonald's or what do I do? And I was fortunate enough to interview with a practice out in St. Louis of 2 incredible doctors. And I thought, this is a place I could work, and who knows if it will turn into something else. They were a super progressive practice, great systems. They did everything digital with SureSmile and things. And worked there for about 3.5 years. It was great. Loved the doctors, learned so much from them. When they offered to let me buy in, it just didn't make sense financially. It hadn't grown enough. Mm-hmm. So it was another one of those, what do I do moments. As an associate, I wasn't making enough to have anything saved to start a practice. I was expecting my 5th kid by then. So I thought, well, I'll go. That's when OSOs were just starting out in a big sense. I thought, well, I'll try this. Maybe I get to be dad and just work and not worry about things. So we moved to Georgia, and I practiced there for 5 years or so. I was always hedging my bets, living frugally and saving just in case things didn't work out. It just wasn't for me. It wasn't a good fit. My parents had moved to northern Alabama from California, where I did high school, and 4 hours from where I was practicing. So I decided, let's start a practice there. Mm-hmm. Just a town I had no connections with, no roots. I didn't get out here and have any kind of runway or anything, but opened doors and just started almost 2 years ago to the day.
And I love it. And I love that I've been able to be a part of some of this journey for you. I think the unfortunate thing is your story is so common. I hear that all the time. I've got so many doctors that I talk to that wanted to purchase a practice and it just fell through, or thought exactly like the track that you have taken, unfortunately. And we all know, if you're out in the Facebook groups, there's a lot of commiseration.
Me
Anyways,
too's, a lot of me too's.
a
Yeah.
lot of me too's. Yes, exactly, out there. But I love it that you were able to make your way through and move into that startup journey. That's really what I want to talk about today, because I think you have a very inspiring story, but also I want to talk about the process that you went through, because you weren't coming right out of school. You had a lot of opportunity to work with some really great doctors along the way, and came to this, I'll call it a point in the road where you said, I'm either going to stay on this corporate route, or I'm going to take a chance on myself and go all in and do this startup and bet on myself. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the process you went through when you were thinking about, okay, I think I'm going to go and I'm going to do a startup. Also, I want you to talk about your vision that you had and how you have really been able to stick to that in your first couple of years, because I really think that's the foundation a lot of times to successful startup practices, is a doctor with a vision. So do you mind just giving us some of the behind the scenes of what that was like as you were making those big decisions?
I'd be happy to. You hit so many good points there, right? I will 100% agree. Mapping out your vision and then being able to stick to it is so critical. Even when I'm part of the, shout out to Rob Laraway, the orthodontic Facebook groups, the startups, there's so many cool things people are doing out there. Yes. But once you map out your vision, you have to stick to what you do and what you want to do, because you can't do everything. There is certainly an inflection point. I can remember during COVID that I was going into the office for the corporate place I was working for, and there wasn't as many things to do. So I was doing some CE, watching some different things. I got so excited because I love to learn. I love to push the boundaries. I like to grow. And I realized that I couldn't do that in the way I wanted to work for someone else. I realized that they could pay me all the money in the world and I wouldn't be happy. So that was part of that inflection point. And then my background is that when I was practicing in St. Louis with the two doctors I worked for, I just really enjoyed the digital being the digital platform of understanding what your case looks like, being predictable, being thorough, those kind of things. And I remember that even when I worked there, dental monitoring had just come out. They had this tiny little table. And I had gone and talked to them and said, hey, this sounds really cool. I went to the two owner doctors. Sometimes when you're a big practice, it's hard to change gears. So when I came out and did my startup, what I found was this is like the ideal time to do a startup, because the companies that are around now allow you to practice almost like a DSO, but as a startup. With the ways that you can outsource and use technology to leverage. So when I started up, I said, okay, I'm going all in on KLON from the start. I'm going all in on remote monitoring. And I had used dental monitoring in the OS zone. So I started with it here, but then I switched to Grin with the human intelligence, which has been such a game changer for us. So we went all in on those kinds of things and then chose what we wanted to outsource. We use Smile Suite, of course, and we started part-time. Now all our new patient calls are there because we wanted our team to really be able to do what they do best and focus on patients and try to slowly build our DSO of what our vendors were around us. It's worked really well. I think for us, we're not as bad as the worst or as best as the best, but we were able to surpass our goals for the first year, and we doubled that the second year, even in this economy, which I think is pretty impressive for not having a single day of runway. Like I hadn't met any doctors before I opened. I hadn't had any connections. So we're super proud of where we are, and we have a long way to go.
And as you should be very proud of where you're at, from hitting your first year goals, second year goals, and not only hitting them, but surpassing them, to also really sticking to that vision. And a lot of times we think about vision as a cultural thing within the practice, but your vision from the very beginning, when we first started talking, and I definitely advocate for this, was a digital practice. I love it that through it all, you weren't swayed by, oh, but what about the cost of this? Or what about the cost of that? Instead, it was like, how do we embrace it and make it work? And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that? I know you were just kind of
Yeah.
touching on it there, but
Touch on some specifics for that a little bit.
yeah.
Our vision, it all goes to the name of the company, right? Orthodontic
Mm,
Design Company. What we have for our patients is a huge 85-inch TV where they can come in and they color something, design a fish, and it comes to life up there, right? Everything we do is made to talk about how we do technology and custom and personalized treatment from the beginning.
yep.
And then when I sat down, I remember this distinctly too. So I said, okay, my goal is to have a smaller team initially and to really leverage them to be awesome people. We hired for personality, not skills, and we trained them. The hardest part of a practice is it's hiring people, it's finding good people, it's training good people, it's managing
Yep.
people, it's turnover. You can ask every single doctor in the world, and that's always going to be number one. If not, they're probably crazy or it's number two. That's the challenge. And so my vision was, okay, what can I outsource? Because then if I can outsource it, somebody else has to manage sick days or training and keep it personable. For example, Grin with human intelligence is a great example of that. We have Renee who works for Grin, and she responds to every single scan or message on Grin. It's a super personal touch for our practice. We don't hire her. When she was gone for vacation a week ago, they had somebody else that filled in for her as Renee. It wasn't something I
You
had to
didn't have
deal
to
with.
do
Yes. And the great thing about that too is because it grows with us. Since we pay
Mhm.
per patient, Renee was a full-time employee in essence, but at a fraction of the cost.
Yeah.
And the same goes to Smile Suite for us too. When we were really slow, we used that part-time, but then we switched to full-time. And that is a full-time set of team that I couldn't pay for in my
Yeah.
own office. And they're trained. I do think that sometimes the tendency is when we use these vendors to outsource, we want to pretend like that they are, oh, it's a light switch. You turn it on, it's going to be perfect. And it's
Right.
not. We do spend a lot of time, like in our team meeting today, I called up Renee and we talked through things like, hey, you're doing this great. How can we make this better? Those companies need information from us to do a good job.
Mhm.
Same thing with Smile Suite. We're constantly reaching out to Smile Suite with emails. Hey, can we tweak this verbiage? Or hey, this didn't go well. Things like that. It's not a turn on. These companies typically, in my experience, want to serve you, but you have to
Mhm.
give them good information to do that. And so that's been the case for us. When you're talking big picture, I remember when I sat down with CFO Ortho, I said, okay, here's your metrics of a standard practice. I said, can you take my employee? They had 19, 20%. Will you
Mhm.
take that down to 30 and take my lab bill and just bump that up 3%? Because that's how I want to practice. And then I remember a month or so later, I said, has anybody else, do you have another practice that's digital like me that you can compare me with? And he said, we don't really separate those out. I said, have you had anybody else that's asked what I asked as far as changing your benchmarks? He's like, no, we never had someone ask that before. And I was genuinely
Shocked.
surprised. I was genuinely surprised. And so even over the last year, when I look back at our numbers, we've been below 13%.
Mhm.
And that's including our Smile Suite fees and things like
Mhm.
that. We've been overstaffed at the same time, in my opinion. When I look at my numbers, we practice 3 clinical days a week. And I ran reports for the month of July for how many appointments per day we were seeing on the clinical side, not new patients. We averaged 13 appointments a day plus 3 virtual appointments a day. We've been able to run that with one assistant very easily. We just hired our second assistant because we're
Yep.
growing. And that's very comfortably. And that's
Yes.
not with me seeing patients. With Kayla, I'm not needed there for when we add braces or when there's a broken bracket. So I end up being really productive in my day. Now I can do a couple of virtual appointments and a virtual setup for my braces or aligners while somebody's doing a full bond and I'm not
Mhm.
needed till the end, right?
Yeah.
So there certainly is a cost, right? You certainly do delay maybe your profitability a little bit in the beginning, but when you stick to that vision, you have a message to sell and tell.
Mhm.
What makes you different? Does your team see that difference and they start to believe in it too? That makes a big difference. Does that answer some of your questions a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. This is why I wanted you on because so many of my doctors are in the same boat as you when you first started with me. I just want to say to anybody out there listening, it is possible to start your practice digital from the beginning and to be mindful of the amount of team members that you're going to have, to be mindful of all of that and still have it work. I think you're just this perfect example of a startup that's been able to do this right out of the gate, right from the beginning. And what I want people to hear is you said 13 patients, 3 days a week with a couple virtual. That doesn't mean that you're a small practice. And I know we're not going to talk about where your numbers are at, but I'll just let everybody know you're not running a small practice. You're running a very efficient practice. And I think that is really the key. And I talk a lot about this. You can probably remember us having conversations about this, but right from the beginning, your treatment planning and the way you're doing it and how often you're bringing patients back, thinking and planning for all of those things in the beginning, you had this great vision on what you were doing. And I love that you did this, pushing your accountant to say, hey, I'm not going to fall in these norms, and I don't want to be held to these standard of norms of where my practice should fall within certain numbers. I'm still overall looking for that overhead component of what's my overhead to income component of it. But I think just being aware of that from the beginning, and that's, again, why I wanted you on, because I've got so many docs that want to do this. And it's scary. You get out there in the Facebook groups, you're in them, and you hear people saying, oh, you can't do that. Oh, your overhead's going to be too high. Oh, this, oh, that. And I'm just excited to have you talking about this.
I think those Facebook groups are so beneficial to startups. They're really beneficial when you're like, hey, I don't know anything about X, Y, and Z, sterilization, or where did you find this marketing item? I think they can be dangerous for people when you're talking about vision. Should I do this or this? Because everybody has their own vision, and you're going to get 10 different answers, right? I had the advantage in some ways that I had been out long enough to have seen different ways to do things. But I think you really have to hone in on what you want it to be and then go after it. And a good example of that for me is we don't make retainers in-house. We don't do 3D printing of stuff and things like that. I bought a $1,000 cheap 3D printer, and I've never done anything with it. The reason is because it doesn't go into my vision, right? My vision is, okay, if I scale and grow, I don't want another system that I have to retrain on. I don't want somebody to have to manage that. That's not patient facing for my team. So I started from the beginning. Another example of that is I was just on a call with Grin today in our team meeting. The person who manages lots of different Grin practices gave us a huge compliment. She said, you are my practice that uses Grin more than anybody else. She said, you guys do virtual appointments and send videos. All your patients message on there, like whether it's about payments or whether it's about going to be late or things like that. And that's because we started with that vision from the beginning. When you do it for all your patients and you start that way, you train your patients that way. Our phone calls are way down. We were even at a team meeting and we had scheduled one appointment. I laugh about this. We had scheduled one appointment to deliver retainers and put a sign on the door that said, call this cell phone number when you get here. Do you know what they did? They messaged me on Grin. We're here.
I love that.
Because we trained our patients and we're like, that's funny. I'm glad we got the notification. Our patients are constantly using it. And because it's a person also, that Grin uses to, like, they're wishing her happy holidays and things like, it's very personable. Yeah. But it's when you set up your systems from the beginning, especially as a new practice, it trains your team and your patients that way. But it takes a long time for you to dial in your systems, right? We're still getting better about how we use these systems. When you're thinking about outsourcing, you don't want to outsource everything, but benefit your patients and you, right? Does it get rid of a team member, or is it hiring somebody outside your office as you grow? Those kind of things you have to think about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, think back, what advice would you give to doctors that may be listening right now, whether they're considering doing a startup or they're going to do an acquisition and they're saying, this is my vision. This has been what I want to do. But it sounds a bit scary. It sounds a bit hard. And I know you just said maybe not jump all in with everything at once, but can you give some advice, having been through this now 2 years out? What would you say if you were to look back, either change anything or be like, this worked really well. I think this is a repeatable thing that people can implement.
That's a really tough question. I think there's going to be two different groups of people. There are those who have been out for several years and they're thinking, okay, I'm 40, should I start my own practice? You've had some experience. For those people, you've probably had enough experience to know some things that you like and don't like. And then it really is sitting down and mapping and being able to articulate exactly what your vision is. Sometimes we're not great about really knowing what that vision looks like, being able to stick to that. The other kind of half of that coin is managing people is a little new for a lot of people. One book I highly recommend is Radical Candor. To learn how to communicate with your team and be honest and kind. For those coming out of school, I think finding a really good mentor is going to be critical, because when you haven't been out in practice enough to see many different things and to know how you would put it together, I'm imagining myself coming out of school and buying a practice. It probably would have been a disaster. You know what I mean? Just because you do grow and learn practicing in different situations and seeing different offices. Shadowing different offices is part of that, but finding one or two really good mentors that you want to emulate. Even for myself, who's been out, I'm going to go out and shadow Brandon Owen, who's a super smart guy, right? Because I know there's things that we practice somewhat similar that I can learn from him.
Yeah.
So those mentors, and I think a lot of people in orthodontics were blessed because most people are really open to opening their doors and a phone call and things like that. I haven't met too many people that aren't that way.
For sure. How about with the technology component? We've got just a buffet of different things in front of us.
Yeah.
How would you advise? Would you say pick a system and stick with it and really move forward with it? You started with one platform, moved to a different platform. Any insight there you could give?
I'll try. What I will say, I'll talk to the clinical side and then maybe the remote side, but there's a couple systems that I use that are really critical to what we do. One of them is custom braces. And so for us, custom braces and aligners, it makes the system very the same. Patient comes in, okay, we're going to do custom something. Great. You're going to come back in 3 or 4 weeks and we're going to do it all. And when that's just the way you do it and you charge the same, it makes things simple. It makes our system simple. When I set up the case, I'm planning the case. I put the notes in for the first several appointments, exactly what we're going to do. So it's planned out. When I practiced in St. Louis, we did SureSmile for every single patient. And then I practiced by myself after that for several years. I don't feel like there was a case, even though a lot of my cases finished really well, that finished as well or as predictably as when we digitally planned our cases. So in my hands, that's what I saw. And so for me, that was a real motivation to jump in on this. I don't like unpredictability either. And if I'm building a house, I want to plan it from the beginning, not run into surprises and things like that. And so while it is a benefit to patients and me, as you go and market yourself, you do want to be unique, right? But when patients come in, if you read our 100 Google reviews, there probably aren't any or many that talk about custom braces. It still is about the doctor and the team and how things look and feel, right? And the convenience. That answers maybe that part for me. I'm just OCD and I feel like I'm a better orthodontist that way. I think it is a benefit to patients as well.
Yeah.
Those kind of things I think you do have to plan to build into your fees a little bit. For me, the remote monitoring has been a game changer too. Those are probably the two biggest systems. We don't have many short appointments in our schedule. We don't have aligner checks. We don't have expander checks. We don't have a lot of those kind of things, which is why even at 13 appointments, a lot of them are longer appointments. We try to get more done in those appointments than just short stuff. So Grin has been awesome for us. It's certainly sets us apart. You look on our reviews, the amount of times patients talk about convenience or feeling like that their hands being held to the process and good communication and things like that. And it even allows me to push the limits when I try something new, because if it doesn't go well, I've never had a patient frustrated that something broke or didn't work because they get a hold of me. And so I am constantly pushing myself, even clinically, on what I can do and try and learn. And I haven't had it burn me because of that, which has been an unanticipated benefit, right? It's just been something that 100 times out of 100 I would jump into. I honestly think those will be the standard of care at some point. I think custom brackets and remote monitoring is going to be part of and we're in an advantage as a startup because it's much easier to pivot that way when you're starting than trying to take a big practice and change it. Because my first couple of clinical assistants didn't know how to direct bond. They only knew how to bond with an indirect jig, and a broken bracket came in, they would cut the jig and they didn't need me because that's how we trained them. So I think those two things will be standard. And we've seen patients, that's what patients want. They want communication. They don't want to come in every month. And it works for both of us if we build our practice that way. I remember when I was using dental monitoring and I was afraid to jump in, but when you're small, it's easy to pivot. It wasn't a big pain point when we pivoted, and I don't regret it at all. It's made us more personable and it's less cost. So we've really enjoyed it. I think when you're willing as a new practice to jump in on technologies like orthodontic details, when that came out, I looked at it and said, okay, this is a system I can't build on my own. They were charging $150 a month. That's a couple hours of my employees' time. It's an incredible system. Every single thing in the office we order is in one spot and it takes a couple clicks. As we go through the day, we can just add things to the cart from anywhere, front desk, Amazon, any of the vendors. And then at the end of the month, someone can order them. When you're a small practice, it's easy to use that and create systems. And then as these companies grow, their prices grow and things like that. For us, we've been willing to jump on new technologies fairly quickly because we can. And then we found huge benefits in it when it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that takes us back to what you said in the very beginning here about because you had worked for a DSO before, I think that your willingness to adapt to third-party companies has probably come a little bit from that. I think you said that a little bit earlier. And just that, I don't know, openness to outsourcing. When you were just talking about details and just something that we don't even put a lot of thought into ordering. But when you think about all of the different things out there that our team members, and especially in a startup, I always say our team member is wearing multiple hats, right? Hey docs, on this podcast, I talk about a lot of different ways you can set your practice apart. But here's one that might surprise you. Maybe you haven't thought about it before, but the equipment you use can make a big difference, not just for the patient experience, but for you and your team too. That's why I want to let you know about a new line of orthodontic equipment from ADEC. I visited their headquarters in Oregon earlier this year to take a sneak peek for myself, and I have to say, I was impressed. ADEC has manufactured award-winning dental equipment for 60 plus years, and they're bringing that same level of excellence to ortho. From comfortable, compact patient chairs to a versatile workstation and delivery to ergonomic dental stools, ADEC orthodontic equipment is designed for a smooth and easy workflow. Day after day, patient after patient, see the difference it can make for your practice. Click the link in our show notes to learn more about ADEC Orthodontic Solutions. Hey docs, did you know that October is Substance Abuse Prevention Month? As you may recall, this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart because I believe at some point in our lives, we will each know and love an addict. And through all of the pain and chaos, we just want to see them heal. But finding help is hard, and reaching recovery is even harder. That is where 180 Ministries comes in, a faith-based recovery program that offers life-changing support to individuals battling substance abuse and addiction. With locations across Colorado and Utah, they provide a safe, compassionate program predicated on hope and healing for men and women and for mothers and children. That is why I am featuring them on the show, because I know that our dental and orthodontic community can help make a difference in the fight for relief. Whether you are seeking help in recovery or are wanting to make a donation towards this amazing cause, visit 180ministries.net to learn more about how you can help support this incredible mission. Let's join together to turn lives around one step at a time. They're your TC, they're your front desk, they're your clinical ordering, they're your SteriTech, they're doing it all, right? And if we can find the right systems to complement so that they can be the best at what they can be, that I think is just like kind of the gold star there. But I'm wondering if there's anything on that side that you can talk about. You've been talking a lot about the clinical side, but just that mentality and how that has come to fruition.
I think one of our goals is for our team to be as present as possible to serve patients. And we will continue to probably outsource the things that don't make sense to our day. I don't know if this is speaking to what you're getting at, but my next hire will probably be my ortho VA. And I think you had them on a while ago, and I've talked to them, things like that.
Yep.
And because there are some software packages out there that have a lot of cool tools, but I'm wary because a lot of times you still need someone to run them, and they don't necessarily reduce an employee and things like that.
Yep.
But one of the biggest tools that we use right now, well, we can get this later, but my ortho VA is awesome because, again, it's somebody that is working 40 hours a week, right? It's a reduced cost, but they can do all my follow-ups for treatment pending. They could do also putting in all my images, right? They could respond to patients on Grin if they need to when times when we can't, or they can run reports and do money follow-up. So here's somebody in the office that I'm not managing a person as much, a little bit, but it's somebody that can do lots of things in the office that can be done virtually versus maybe just a company. So maybe that speaks a little bit to where we're headed, but that's our next hire, will be a virtual assistant to then, again, keep my team doing the things that are most important in front of patients, and then use kind of systems to the background work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like you have a real strategy to like what you're going to outsource and what you're going to keep in-house. Any insight you want to share with us on like how do you make that decision? My ortho VA, I love that. I've got a lot of docs that are using them, and it is exactly what you're talking about there. It's this component of it's still an employee, but it's not an employee under the umbrella of the practice,
Yeah,
and you still have to manage them. You still have to tell them
sure.
what needs to happen. So I'm wondering if you could talk about your strategy on, okay, when will I hire an in-person, or my who is my who an outsourced or a who that's insourced?
No, it's tough. When I first started, I think when I was outsourcing generally things, take Smile Suite, for example, that one was, okay, here I have a team of people I'm hiring and a patient per call type of a situation, right? And what I found was when we very first started up, even though we had nothing to do and I had 2 employees, I was overstaffed, between going to lunch or doing team meetings or whatever, I think Smile Suite still took 10 new patient calls for us on average a month. Okay, so now I'm not stressed and my team's not stressed if the phone's ringing and things like that. So just my stress level went down, that we weren't missing a critical call. And I couldn't hire somebody for whatever that was a month to manage my phones. And then as we grew, we just made the decision, okay, they seem to be doing a good job. We're not getting complaints, right? Let's free up my one front desk person. Now we had somebody full-time front desk to, again, do everything else and manage the background and manage patients and manage social media. There's so many things and so many hats.
Yes.
And then at the same time, we went back multiple times and said, okay, let's sit down with Smile Suite and review our verbiage. Let's dial this in again. And we send emails and try and hone it in. It's not just a turn it on and let it go thing. And we do ask for, hey, can you send us recordings of your last 3 calls so we can listen to them every now and then, the thing. Yeah. So for us, again, now we probably spend $500 a month on Smile Suite, right? But it's worth every penny. And that's not all our new patients, because some come to the website and some call, whatever. But of our ones that call in, that's a great investment for us because it's a team of people and we're not training them and we're not worried about if they're sick, but we know they're going to be there, right? And it actually expands our reach of hours and things. So just like Grin expands our hours, where we tell patients, okay, we respond 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. 7 days a week, because that's what Renee does. It expands my ability to be there for patients, right, at a reduced cost that grows with us. Yeah. So those were 2 things. Some of the other things when I think about outsourcing is, like, Details for me was at such a price point. Here's a system that I can't create on my own, if that makes sense, at that price point at the time. And I knew that as we grew, that would become more complicated. And so for me, that made sense because I knew that would be a big part. I didn't anticipate that as they would grow, they would also start doing price savings and things like that. That wasn't even part of my thought process at the time. But it was, okay, what I have seen is that the practices that really thrive, they're really good at culture and creating their own systems. And I see a lot of times on Facebook and things like, hey, send me what your document, your system or things like that is. And I think that's okay. But the practices I've seen that really thrive, they're really good at saying, okay, this is how we do things. We've got to build out our system. And so we spend a lot of time in team meetings regularly, and we encourage them to create systems. We constantly are going over and tweaking those systems. And so for me, that was another reason to start with some of the technology I did from the beginning, is because it takes a long time to build and refine. And you're constantly refining those systems to grow with you and match what you want to make them work. So as far as other outsourcing, if it really benefits the patient and it benefits us, that's a really good place to start, right? And then if it tends to grow with you, then that really made sense to me as well, as far as cost-wise. And those kind of things, as far as hiring somebody in person or virtual, that's a tough call, right? I think that in the end, you do have to be overstaffed in person. There's just so many things that go on with people that you're hiring. Then they have families, right? And they're people. And so you can't expect that every single day, every single person's going to be at the office. And as you're growing, it's tough because you're growing like this and your hiring is stepwise, right? Which is why it's nice, again, to go back to, if you can outsource companies that grow with you, you don't have that problem of being overstaffed and then understaffed and then overstaffed and understaffed as you're growing when you outsource that grow with you. So I think my goal eventually is to be a little bit overstaffed person-wise, but at the same time, I just know that if we get a virtual person, we can get a lot of the things done with still human touch point, which I think is really important, because there are a lot of things that you can outsource, and this AI stuff is the hot word. But in the end, we all know when it's AI and when it's not, or when it's personal and it's not. Nobody ever responded to the automatic messages on dental monitoring when I was monitoring that. Nobody ever
Yeah.
said, "Oh, you have a great weekend too." And so those are the way I think about things, right?
Yeah.
If I can outsource, but it's still a personal touch, that's
Mm-hmm.
a huge win for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Such good insight. And I think about this again, looking at where you've come from to where you're at now and where you're going. And I'm just going to say, I don't think for any doctors that are listening, there is not a better time to implement new systems than when you're a startup. And you have got the
100%.
time to put, like, you've got the time to do the work, to put in the systems, because once they're in place, like you said a little bit earlier, whether it's a liner, whether it's a custom bracket, it's still a digital system, and you're just bouncing between the two. Or with what you're doing as you're evolving with what you're outsourcing from a personnel standpoint or a personal touch standpoint or whatnot, if you can work on those now while you're slower, imagine where you're going to be in another 3 years, as these have just become the DNA of your practice, and it just is this intricate part of what.
And let me just say, I think the part of that too is that a really critical component for us is we do regular team meetings. And right
Mhm.
now, we used to be once a month, and we're not talking like a lunch meeting. We would do an entire morning, right?
Mhm.
4 or 5 hours. We split that up to now be every other week, and we do a whole marketing one, and then we do the marketing training, and then numbers and systems and things. And those meetings are not an hour long, they're 2 or 3 hours minimum. And it's time for them to bring things up. But those are critical because that's where systems get ironed out. That's where we
Yes.
get team buy-in, and that's where I'm training my team to help them catch a bit of creating those systems. Because I don't want it to be all me trying to create systems. I want to grow them so that they feel ownership and create what works, and then we're constantly coming back and tweaking those. And if you do that as a startup as you go, your system is not going to be perfect, right? It's going to be pretty wonky, and as you grow, and as we've grown, say with Grin and how we use that system, what we do and how we do it has totally morphed. But we've had the slow time and the slow experience to morph with it so that our system grows at the same time. And it's a constant battle, right, to learn and grow. So one of the things that we're doing now, which I think is super helpful, is I love the tool Loom
Mhm.
videos. And
Yes.
I even pay for the upgraded AI version because what we do is, okay, if there's something you know how to do, take a video of it, right? You can use your phone, you can use the computer, and you can capture the screen of you doing it, or if it's like sterilization on your phone, talk about it. Talk about what you're doing, create the video. And then with the AI, it creates a document that has, from what you say, the standard steps of what you're doing. And then we put all of those in an Asana board. So our
Mhm.
standard operating protocols is an Asana board that has a link to the Loom plus the document that the Loom created, right? Just from our steps. And so as we create in Asana a board of how to do all these things with videos and documents, right? We may have to go back and tweak them, but that's when we bring on our My Ortho VA, guess where they're going to live? They're going to
Yeah.
live on Asana, and our standard operating procedures of how to do things are already going to be in there with a video of how you do it on the computer, or a document if you just want a quick reference. So that's my two favorite tools right now for systems. Is Loom is pretty inexpensive. Pay for the AI if you can afford it, or at least start without AI. And then Asana is free, right?
Mm.
For up to 10 users. And so we combine those two together, and we're trying to work on that. And you can never get past good old paper too, but that's where we're trying to live as we create our system, so that when we bring in a virtual assistant, we can plug them into that system already of, okay, here's what you do and here's how you do it. And then checklists are built in.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. And what a great pearl you just dropped on us there. I know a lot of docs are like, got it. I'm doing that. That's
Oh,
perfect.
nobody should imagine that we're perfect at this either. We constantly go back and trying to redo it, and we encourage our team members to make these things and whatnot. And we're constantly trying to work on our systems, but you have to set aside the time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will definitely echo what you just said. You've got to take time to work on your business while you're in your business. And I know you've heard me say that before, and lots of people have heard me say that, but there we have to, as business owners, have that time to work on the systems, because they don't just happen by osmosis. They don't just happen by, I thought it, so therefore it comes into play. And like you're saying, you're constantly tweaking and refining and defining as you're going along. And then also, I think coming back and saying, hey, this worked, but it isn't working as well as I want. So let's refine it again. Let's
Yeah.
define it again. Or we're making a whole shift now and we're going to shift on to this next thing. It's never a pick it and stick it. I find in anything that we're doing.
No, can't be afraid to throw something away, right? Or redo it.
Exactly. So as we finish up here, this has been just so wonderful. And I just thank you for taking the time to share some of your insights here. I'm wondering if you can, I don't know, just leave us with 3 pieces of advice, especially for maybe younger doctors that are out there that are maybe looking to start their own practice or have been in the situation that you're in and making that, what do I do? Maybe three top pieces of advice for anybody out there.
We start with some encouragement. I think you can do it. That's the first thing is a lot of times we want to feel overwhelmed. And I'd like to say, look, if the person down the street can do it, none of us are any better than you are. You can do it. It's believe in yourself. I think go with your strengths that got you there. All of us are good at different things and are going to go about it different ways. Don't enjoy social media. I'm not good at it. So that's not something I leaned into, if that makes sense. So there's different ways that you can do it, but believe that you can do it and you can. I know that having been out in practice long enough, there's always high months and low months. So just don't get too high and don't get too low. And having worked in corporate, what I realized too is that's across the country. It's not location specific. And so when you get into a big business like that, there's just these market forces that are bigger than you are, bigger than your town that nobody can really put their finger on. But there's going to be slow months and good months and has nothing to do with you as you go through that startup process. I think culture and how you interact with your team, probably the biggest piece of advice I would give is regular team meetings, creating a team culture that is truly unique where people want to work. For me, one of the things I say to my team that I think is sometimes a culture or attitude shift is, look, I tell them it's only a mistake if you can't fix it. Because I want my team, and I tell them when I hire them, I want you to make mistakes. Because if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning, you're not pushing. And I want them to feel comfortable trying things and coming up with ideas and giving feedback. And there's been multiple times where I've had a new TC and they didn't understand. They charged a patient phase 1 for a full treatment. Like, no big deal. It's just money. Like, you're going to learn. I don't get mad at them. Like, it's a mistake. It's something we can fix. We don't charge the patient more. We don't make them go back and call. It's just a mistake. And so that's one of my sayings for my team is it's only a mistake if you can't fix it. And guess what? Most every mistake, or it's not a big deal. So that's my advice, I guess. The other part is nobody that I've ever hired or if I've ever talked to comes and says, yeah, I like conflict, right? Every person you hire, and including yourself, probably, I don't like conflict. And what that usually translates to is I don't want to call on my team member and talk to them about something that's uncomfortable, right? But for me, I think that if you're not doing that in a really kind way, you're doing everybody a disservice. And so what I found though is the 2 keys for me have been, I always ask team member first, like, hey, what's going on? Or tell me about this. Or like, I want to start with a question because more often than not, I'm going to gain insights to where they're coming from. And then the other things I'm training my team to do the same thing is if there is a conflict, your words are, hey, I saw this or this happened. This is how it made me feel. We're not blaming them for doing something wrong, but we're owning our feelings. And whenever a team comes in to talk to me, I'm trying to model that same behavior that I'm doing with them to do with each other.
Yes, that's great.
And so I'm constantly doing that because I think that is just as critical in an office and protecting that. So for us, going back to it, staffing is the biggest challenge. We've been through, I don't know if I counted 10 employees in the last 2 years, right? And it's all the stories, right? I had one employee that showed up for 4 days at work over 6 weeks and then asked for severance. I had an employee that we let go after 2 weeks because we never had drama in the office and suddenly we did. And whether it was her or not, it just wasn't a good mix. And so don't be afraid you have to set the tone for what culture you want. That vision is just as important as the vision of digital or braces or grin or whatever it is. So I think those are the things when you're starting up that are tough to learn, right? Is the managing people. And that Radical Candor book was really helpful for me in understanding how to do that. So that's something I would highly recommend because I don't think that's something that most young doctors have a ton of experience with, whether you've been out for 10 years or not.
Yeah, totally agree. Thanks for sharing that. I think those are all great points. And again, Radical Candor is probably going to have a big run on Amazon. They're going to be like,
I don't know.
the heck? What happened here? So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, maybe get some peer advice or just some, I don't know, insight on doing a startup or where they're at, how can they do that?
Sure, they could probably email me. My email is areynolds@orthodesignco. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. This has been just a joy having you on. And as you probably know, the way I like to finish up our Hey Docs is to do a speed round. Hey Docs, let's talk about Smile Suite, because it's not just another scheduling system. It's a game changer in the world of new patient management. And as a proud Smile Suite partner, I've witnessed the incredible impact it has on practices of all sizes. Smile Suite means your new patient calls and web leads are expertly handled 7 days a week, even during nights and weekends. And they offer top-notch customizable presentation software and seamless post-consultation follow-up. It's like having a secret weapon for your practice's success. Curious? Dive into the revolution at GetSmileSuite.com. And don't forget to mention Hey Docs to unlock some extra goodies. Elevate your practice with Smile Suite, because every smile deserves a suite of excellence. Are you ready for the speed round challenge?
I am so ready.
All right. If you could start any business right now, what would it be?
Oh, I'm gonna go like pie in the sky. I would not be able to do this, but if I could create a software that makes all the other softwares talk, that's the worst part of being an orthodontist in the business world right now, is you've got your PMS up and your Grin and your texting software and your OrthoDocs and whatever it is, right? If I could create software that could just make softwares talk, that would be the business I would start, and it makes them all work together so that you don't have to enter in things. That's my dream.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. I think there'd be a lot of people that'd be happy if you could invent that.
I don't want to invent it. I want somebody else to invent it so I can use it, because I don't think I could invent it. How about that?
Okay, there you go. There you go. What's the best investment you've made?
Let's see. Outside of my wife, my family, my religion, it would probably be just believing that I could do it, right? That goes from education to starting up, and just, I think this practice is definitely part of that, right? It certainly is intimidating to do it. And for me, it was a little bit scary because I didn't have an associate job. So when I did this, it was all savings, and then hopefully the 5 kids and the wife are still eating after 2 years, right? Before it runs out of money. But I don't regret it. And it's for some of those same reasons of just being fulfilled. It's not about money.
Yeah, perfect. How do you handle work-related stress?
I'm a big runner. So I like to run. I put on religious texts that just in the background, and that's my stress relief. So that was 5:30 this morning.
I love it. All right. And then one trend in the industry you're excited about.
One trend in the industry. I guess some of the things we just talked about is just the virtual trend of being able to outsource in general. For me, I guess the one I'm most interested in would be this, my Ortho VA. That's a cool thing. I think aligners and braces becoming very custom and digital. And I think the practice of the future is a smaller footprint in a physical space, but using your resources and even a smaller team to extend your hands a little bit and wrap around patients.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to lean into. But
Yep. And you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job at it. And our last question, the most valuable piece of advice you would give someone just starting their career?
Oh, goodness sakes.
I know. Tough ones.
Most valuable piece. You are enough. And comparison is a really dangerous thing in the orthodontic world. Your value will come from who you are as a person and at home, not from your practice. So practice to live and to enjoy, and make it something you can enjoy. Don't make your practice like somebody else's down the street. Make yours. Make it work for you.
That's great. That's great. Adam, this has been just an absolute treat. Thank you so much.
You're so awesome.
Yeah, well, thanks. Thanks for being on Hey Docs. And I just appreciate your candor today and just giving us so much good information on how you've been as successful as you have been in your first 2 years.
We're still just learning everybody else so much.
Thank you. See you.
Bye.